Welcome to the Southern Regional Advisory Council meeting. Glad to see everybody here. This meeting is being held here in Richfield at the DWR office. It is May 21st, 6 p.m. and it is also being streamed live on YouTube. A quick reminder to those in attendance, the microphones in this office are situated in the ceiling and they're centered in the room, so they will pick up every conversation, both here from RAC members and those in attendance. So be careful, knowing that it is being streamed live on YouTube. So this public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management. The RAC considers your feedback before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board meeting following this meeting will be on June 13th. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. I'd like to welcome two Wildlife Board members in attendance, both Mr. Gary Nielsen online and Paula Richmond here in person. Thank you for being here. Wildlife management is complex and sometimes it's emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we are here. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a green comment card. We've got a bunch outside. Put on there the agenda item you'd like to speak on, and we'll make sure you have time to share your opinions. We expect those in attendance to respect those who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, laughing, snickering, or laughing while someone else is speaking. You can help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, I will ask attendees to be respectful. If it continues, we will ask you to leave. Please help us reduce distractions, especially in this room, by putting your phone on silent. And if you need to take a call, please step outside. I'd like to welcome all RAC members in attendance today. We will go ahead and do some quick introductions. Tell us where you're from and what group you represent. We'll start with Russell down the end.
I'm Russ Gardner. I represent Ag. I live in Enterprise.
Tammy Pearson. I live in Minersville, Beaver County, and I am county commissioner there and represent the elected officials.
Ryan Johnson. I'm public at large and I'm from Mineral.
Mike Grant, represent the sportsmen from Annabella.
Chuck Chamberlain, represent the Forest Service out of Cedar City.
Merlin King from Hicknall. I represent agriculture.
We also have Brooklyn online. Would you like to introduce yourself, Brooklyn?
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Cox. I'm the assistant field manager for the BLM in Cedar City.
Thanks, Brooklyn. And I'm Austin Atkinson, the chair of this RAC, and I live in Cedar City, represent public at large. We welcome all the DWR staff that is also here in attendance today, especially those that have previously given presentations online. We appreciate that. Thank you for being thorough on those. Welcome the public that's attending in person and also watching on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, you needed to previously submit your comments online, which we've all received and we will be discussing tonight. Like I said, if you want to make a comment here in person, please fill out one of those green cards and we'll get you. The presentations will not be provided here in this meeting. They will be, they were provided previously online and we have all reviewed those and hope you have as well. I think that takes care of introductions. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda for tonight and minutes from our last meeting. I'll entertain a motion on that. Everybody had a chance to review those minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes on the agenda.
Second that.
Got a motion to approve the agenda in the minutes by Mike and a second by Tim. All those in favor here in person, raise a hand. Unanimous here, Brooklyn. Brooklyn gives us a raise a hand. That's unanimous. We are approved. We can take it forward. Welcome, Rachel. Pull up a chair. We can
Sit you on the end somewhere.
I'll introduce another RAC member joining us, DeBloois from Cedar City. She represents our non-consumptive users, so thanks for being here. Okay, agenda item number 3. This will be the Wildlife Board meeting update. And lucky me, I get to provide that to you. Go to my notes. So the Wildlife Board meeting, this was held May 2nd in Farmington, Utah. And this was a very thorough agenda. Agenda item number 3, I'll start there. This was our buck deer permit recommendations. There was a motion to approve as presented. There was an attempt at an amended motion to meet in the middle with an increase in southern region permits. That amended motion dies. So the buck deer permit recommendations passed as presented by the division, which is the same how this RAC passed it as well. Agenda item number 4 was once in a lifetime permit recommendations. There was a motion to approve the once in a lifetime permit recommendations as presented, but it included an increase in moose permits from 22 to 25. I believe that was on the North Slope Summit unit. There was an amended motion to that to also increase the bison permit numbers on hunt 6535 from 3 permits up to 5 permits. And that amended motion was accepted. There was a second amended motion to reduce the mineral mountain ram permits by 1, and that amendment failed. So I believe as it went was passed to increase the moose permits on North Slope Summit and the 1 bison hunt, and everything else once a lifetime passed as presented. Sound accurate? For bull elk permit recommendations, there was 1 motion that passed unanimously to approve the bull elk permit recommendations as presented. No changes. Agenda item number 6 was buck pronghorn permit recommendations. That also passed as presented by the division unanimously. All of those obviously were finalized and pushed through the draw, and draw results are released based on all those permit recommendations for all stations. Continuing on to agenda item number 7, antlerless permit recommendations. Those were passed as presented unanimously, and they wanted to add language in the guidebooks about not taking a cow moose accompanied by a calf moose. So we'll probably see something in there about that. I haven't checked the new field regulations to see if it made it in there, but those are available now. Agenda item number 8 was the shed, antler gathering, and big game rule amendments. There was quite a few items thrown into this agenda item, but there was a motion that failed to keep the requirement to plug bighorn sheep as part of the checkout process. That one failed. There's another motion that failed to ban the possession of thermal imaging for the take of big game year round. That one failed. The motion that was passed was to ask the Shed Antler Gathering Committee to reconvene and to recommend shed antler gathering season dates for residents that match the non-resident dates. There was considerable hang up about closing the season to non-residents, but leaving it open for residents. The division should report back with a new recommendation for the committee during the December 2024 RAC meetings, and that will be placed on the action log. Then there was a failed motion to accept the remainder as presented. That failed. So the ending motion that passed was to accept the remainder of the proposal, excluding the season closure for non-residents on shed antler gathering. So as it stands, shed antler gathering is open for residents and non-residents year round, still requiring the antler gathering ethics course for those specific season dates in the late winter or the spring.
With an ability for the director to shut it down.
Still have the emergency statewide ability to shut it down based on winter. Yes. I think that covers that agenda item. That one took a while. Then agenda item number 9 was the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations, and that motion passed unanimously for those that voted. as recommended by the division. That's the report on the Wildlife Board meeting. If you want to move back and watch any of that, it is available on YouTube. And that's it for my board meeting update. Go to agenda item number 4 for tonight, which is our regional update from Kevin Munnell.
Would you pull up that presentation, please?
Yep.
Because our agenda is short tonight compared to what it has been, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the regional update than I sometimes do. You're in presenter mode, let me know. I was trying to, we'll go ahead. Okay, go ahead to the first slide, please. Is that a picture you took, Adam?
Yes, well, I just want to make sure I get this full screen, just 1 second. Please share the entire screen.
Okay, so starting with the wildlife section, picture of a couple of lambs there in, I would assume in Zion National Park. So we've been doing lamb surveys on the Mineral Mountains, and production looks really good there, and they'll start looking at the Elk Creek soon. Some somewhat troubling news. We're not sure how troubling it is yet with bighorn sheep in the Zion unit. We did have one dead ewe that tested positive for essentially for pneumonia. It was a ewe that we caught and collared in December, and she was clean at that point. And so sometime in that intervening 4 or 5 months, we assume had contact with domestic sheep and died of pneumonia. We've had small outbreaks of pneumonia in the Zion herd in the past, and they haven't been overly virulent, and the herds come out okay. We don't know yet on this one. It's kind of a wait and see, but it's scary. It's one of our best sheep populations in the state, and if you have a really virulent strain of pneumonia go through a bighorn sheep herd, it can be devastating. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed there and monitoring that population as close as we can. Teresa, anything you want to add to that?
No, and then that photo is the minerals. So.
Yeah, with all the lambs. So, okay, next slide. If you live anywhere around where we have Utah prairie dogs, you know that populations are up. They were way up last year. They're up again this year, which is a blessing and a curse. It helps us in that we're moving, working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to try to move prairie dogs towards delisting, and so population increases help us with that. But it increases conflicts with private property and croplands. We have lots of tools to deal with that. And we're working our hardest to try to stay on top of that. But if anybody has issues there, please reach out to our office. We'll do our best to resolve the conflicts. Let's go to the next slide. Just some other things going on with in the wildlife section. Picture on the upper left is a hummingbird that was caught down in Lytle Ranch where they're doing some banding. Lots of raptor field trips, lots of great horned owl chicks found. IMVCR bird surveys across the region. There is this is a year there our non-game program kind of rotates through what species they focus on any individual year. This year they'll be doing a lot of bat work. And so if anybody has an interest in going out and netting bats at night, it's a pretty cool experience. We can certainly get you out and to participate in that. Bats are something that we monitor close because of white nose syndrome, which has gone across most of the country. We're one of the few states that has not had white nose syndrome detected in the state. If it's found in the bats back east, there's populations that have gone from millions down to thousands on the zone, so it can really impact bat populations seriously. And then we'll be doing, Teresa and some of the biologists met with some folks in Boulder last night just to kind of talk about what's going on in the Division of Wildlife. Next slide. Lots of good news with bald eagles. We found a new nest on the Boulder Mountain. I think that's a picture of that nest there with one of the adults there was tagged in Flagstaff. It's a nest that we didn't know about until this year. and they seem to be doing well. We also have a nest that's very visible in Iron County. A lot of people are taking advantage of going out and seeing, and so far people are doing well, kind of keeping their distance, but also being able to enjoy seeing the bald eagles there and where they're out where people can see them. And then this next slide, maybe this is, if you'll go to the next slide, maybe if you look very closely there, that's an actual picture from of one of the eagles in that nest, and it's got a prairie dog in its talons. So it's, you know, one of our control measures for prairie dogs. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So moving on to our aquatic section, this is a really busy time of year for them with all the gill netting. Just an update on Penguich Dam. The temporary repairs are holding up, which we're very glad to see. That got pretty scary for a brief time, but Garfield County sprung into action and working with the water rights and others. They seem to have, there's still more repairs to be done, but we've avoided major catastrophe there. And the fact that the runoff is coming down slowly is helping there because the outlet structure is able to stay up with the inflow, and we're doing okay. We had another little issue with the Kolob Reservoir spillway. Washington County Water Conservancy District got up and made those repairs. We don't expect any impact to the fishery there. To just give you some results of what our fish populations look like. This is the time of year where my aquatic staff is out gill netting lakes to monitor fish populations. So Penguich Lake looks really good. That's a picture from this year of a tiger trout that was caught in Penguich Lake. The good news here is last year we were really concerned because the Utah chub numbers jumped way up in Penguich Lake. We have a lot of predators in that lake, so we're going to try to control the Utah chub numbers, and really happy to see that those numbers were way down this year compared to where they were last year. You can see a picture of the fish are healthy.
I'm not making fun of you. So don't
I'm
get
glad
me
to
in
hear-
trouble.
I'm glad to
He
hear
says
that.
he thinks he ate most of the chubs.
Big mouth brown.
Yeah, that one, that's actually a tiger, but yeah, he could eat a few.
Yeah.
Next slide. So Kolob Reservoir, not quite as good a news there. We're trying to find the right balance in Kolob. Go back to the last slide. Just look at the size of the fish on the right-hand side and just the girth and how healthy they look there. And Penguich Reservoir going back over to Kolob. Fish overpopulated, and that's why the fish are small and look thin. We're implementing a new management plan in Kolob Reservoir and trying to find the balance to where you're stocking enough but not too many, and it looks like there's still some work to be done there to get those fish up to just in better condition. So next slide. Kolob Reservoir looks great. You can see how healthy those fish are, and we're meeting the objectives in the management plan for Kolob Reservoir, and again, some really large fish being found in Kolob right now, like that rainbow.
Well, it's more like miners.
That rainbow that Oakley's holding up there. Next slide. Lake Powell should be fantastic this year. We flooded a lot of brush last year as the lake came up, which is really good for spawning and especially for the bass and for crappie. The next couple of years at Lake Powell should be outstanding fishing. It always is good for stripers, but specifically for bass and crappie, this is the time to go down and take advantage of Lake Powell if you enjoy fishing for those. And the lake's coming up now. Expected to get we may get the Castle Rock Cut open part of the summer, probably not the whole summer, but that makes launching at Wahweap a whole lot easier to access the rest of the lake. Our Washington County Field Office, again, their main focus is managing the endemic fish in the Virgin River to keep them off the endangered, to moving towards recovery in some cases, or off the endangered species list in others. They do a lot of work. One of the exciting things is that top picture, those are wound fin. It's one of the endangered fish in the Virgin River and really good things going on there with being able to establish some populations higher in the Virgin River drainage where we weren't sure they would be able to survive, and so far so good. And then I'll go down to that third bullet. The Virgin River group, the folks down there are really involved with the community, with the school kids. In a week, they had over 500 school kids out in the river handling fish, getting some hands-on experience, which is always really popular. And with the growth in St. George, lots of urban wildlife issues, especially this time of year with tortoises and with snakes and with skunks and with everything else. They're really busy responding to those calls. Go ahead to the next slide. Again, one of the main focuses in Washington County is the desert tortoise population. It seems to be doing actually quite well, which is good news right now with some issues going on with what's known as the Northern Corridor and some lawsuits. And anyway, more than I have time to talk about right here. But the fact that population is doing well should be pretty helpful to some efforts that Washington County is trying to make to improve transportation down there. And also Southwest willow flycatchers, western toads, and then some work out in the West Desert to remove some invasive fish species. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Our habitat section, they're getting back on the ground after the winter, trying to finish up last year's projects. We do have 2 new biologists in our habitat section. Hal Guyman filled in behind in our Farm Bill biologist position in Cedar, and then we just hired a new biologist, Gus Torgerson, it's a partner position with the Forest Service over in Escalante, solely to start implementing and increasing the number of projects that we're getting done on the Boulder Mountain. First to finish the NEPA, and then to start, we're hoping to get really large scale projects going on the Boulder Mountain hopefully for the next decade or so. Chuck, you want to add anything to that?
No, it's looking good.
Yeah.
Kind of a waiting process for the Washington.
Gus is a local kid. He grew up in Escalante. He's got strong ties there and should be able to just fit right in there and get a lot of work done. So I mentioned the Northern Corridor EIS, and then we're working on a study on SR 18 from Enterprise down to Pine Valley, looking at trying to mitigate issues with deer. So. Lots of work going on the fish lake. You can read down through those. Some guzzlers going in, big projects, 10,000 acres of mastication and chaining and lop and scatter. Guzzlers being put in, and it's a real partner effort there with sportsman groups and with the federal agencies with work going on the fish lake unit. This is one of the projects we're using to keep dedicated hunters, help them get their hours to try to reestablish browse in some of the areas that have been burned. Around Minersville, planted 100,000 seedlings so far. We've tried to plant sagebrush from seed. It's such a hit and miss. We've even though it's a lot more expensive and a lot higher intensity in labor, these seedlings, it's just probably a better way to go long term to get browse reestablished for mule deer in areas where they've been burned.
So is this for mule deer or for sage hens?
Some of both.
So I was gonna say, that's the only sage hen place we have.
Yeah, it's for
alfalfa.
both for sage grouse and for deer and pronghorn populations really. So outreach section, again, they're really busy with dedicated hunters. We've got a big influx of dedicated hunters coming into the region. They've also been doing a lot of pretty neat, just hands-on events, fly fishing and fly tying event. Just this last weekend, they held a Gunlock Reservoir. If you want to take kids fishing right now, take them down to Gunlock because you can catch a couple hundred crappie in a day that are at, a good size that they're worth filleting and eating. And so to try to increase the use there, they had a catch and cooking event where they had stoves set up right on the shore, and they were filleting people's fish and showing them how to bread them and cook them and fed everybody that was there. fish tacos and how many fish did you cook, Adam?
Oh, well, combined with stripers and everything, probably 100.
Yeah, and they all got eaten. So I think that 20 or 30 people come to that event. So
It takes a lot of crappie to make
Yeah.
some tacos.
It does. So, and lots of other stuff coming up over the summer with the outreach section. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. Law enforcement, really just one thing they wanted me to point out. There was a change in some of the laws, and it comes down to, I don't know what all the issues were, but we had to separate vote registration from the AIS registration process to where now it's a two-step process where we used to just be able to buy them both at once, and we had really high compliance. Now that it's a separate process to get the AIS decal, our compliance has gone way down, and we think it's mostly just people aren't aware, and we need to increase awareness and how to navigate that process. But if you have a boat, make sure you have both stickers to be legal. Paul, anything you want to add to that? So,
If you have any questions, that website at the bottom has really helpful information.
I think that's all I've got. Is there any questions from the RAC that I can answer? If you want to get out and do bats or anything, let's get you out. It's fun. There's a lot of misconceptions about bats. They're actually pretty cool little critters. Okay, awesome.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. This is the Cougar update. This is an informational item. We're lucky to have Mr. Darren here in person, and we will not do a presentation here because he's already given us that online. But would you like to provide any updated clarification?
I can highlight a couple of things from this. First of all, yeah, this is informational. We're not recommending any changes to rule or anything. So we just wanted to, we've had a lot of changes to Cougar management recently. So we wanted to provide some information about how those might be affecting Cougar harvest. A couple take homes. It looks like we've probably peaked in Cougar density in about 2016. We've seen a kind of a steady decline since then. That shows up in a couple of ways. One is our harvest has increased a lot over those years, including last year. Our peak was actually 2 years ago. And then the other is just how trapping is being added into the mix. And took up a certain number of mountain lions this year under the new regulations as we did last year, but houndsmen took fewer, and so that difference was made up by trappers and by people that are hunting spot and stalk. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions anybody has.
Yeah, we'll open up questions from the RAC.
Can you tell us about the new partnership with the Department of
Yes,
Ag and Food?
I can. Last year, the Department of Ag decided to end their partnership with Wildlife Services. Most of the government trappers that worked with Wildlife Services were state employees anyway, so if you're working with trappers, a lot of those folks won't change. There were a couple of federal employees. I'm down here, Kevin, Dustin was a federal employee, but all the other trappers are state employees. They always have been. So they are now being managed directly by Department of Agriculture. We decided to support our sister agency in that change, and so we have an agreement with them to do many things. One would be include livestock verification, so for losses. The other big thing that they're helping us with is flying coyotes, and any other kind of predator management. We've got several things in the agreement, including if they need to take a mountain lion that's killing bighorns, they'll help us with that. They'll help us with some bison management. They help us with domestic sheep, with bighorns that wander, and we need to take those. They'll help us to remove those bighorns that they wander. So several things so far. Things are looking really good, and we've had really good communication with them, and they've been a really good partner for us.
Anything specific that you wanted there?
No, I just wondered if, like, if you've got a predator lion killing, will it take them away from the livestock?
No, in fact,
Taking care of-
we have discussions about priorities. So right now, they're working lambing and getting geared up for that, and they're gonna focus on that during this time of year. Usually when they're working, when they're flying, they're doing both. So they'll fly livestock areas, and we have some priority areas, and they're trying to really coordinate that with contractors, make sure they're getting flown at the same time. And then, with stuff that we may need some help with, generally that'll be fall time frame, usually after livestock are off the mountain, it's less of a problem. So, but we have pretty good communication channels, and they're being really upfront with us about what their priorities need to be.
Okay, yeah, that's my only problem is if you're taking them away from what they need to be doing for the livestock guys.
Yeah, mainly they're working with us in the fall and winter. And then there's a little bit of overlap there during the time livestock are on the mountain, they're out there. That's the plan. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
so, on the cougar depredation, for 2023, the number of incidents and youth-killed losses is way down. Is that because we haven't finished collecting data, or were they really?
That's the last complete year we have. An incident is just any time a producer calls us. So it's a good indication of trend, but it doesn't necessarily mean how many animals. But number of animals killed was down as well.
Yeah.
That seems to correspond with our declines in lions, but it's also real local too. So it depends. Some guys aren't seeing a lot of relief. It really just depends on how accessible those lions are for hunting. And if you're running in a place that's closed off in the wintertime, there's still not a lot of hunting going on. So, and that's something we can work with on ag as well, with agriculture on it as well. They're willing to help us with some of those problems too.
Just to that, do you have any other ways of knowing what your lion population is other than just?
We are currently working with Utah State University to try to come up with some better ways. They're looking at a lot of methods. They're looking at camera traps, hair snares, scat dogs. They have dogs that detect scat. Then you can get DNA from that and identify individuals. So that'd be a good way to give us a better idea of how many we have. But right now, the best we have is just based on our harvest and the age of those lions when they're harvested. And it's useful, but not ideal. And it wasn't in the management plan before for that reason. It was always a couple of years old.
Because all the collar data went away.
No, we still have that. You could use collars the thing about collars is it's really labor intensive. And so the idea there is you collar individuals and then you go back and look at collars, the ratio of collared to uncollared. We can do that with a camera trap setup. These stuff with marked lions are sometimes hard to tell the difference between one and the other. Some of them are distinct, but others are different. It's tough. So you can get hair, you could do the same thing. So that's what USU is currently looking at. They're looking at across the suite of carnivores. So they're looking at bobcats, lions, bears. I think they even got some grant money to look at coyote stuff. So we have some ways to figure out how many coyotes we've got on the landscape. And then the idea would be whatever the most cost-effective method is, we could implement that and then perhaps do kind of a 5-year rotation of the state. Get some good every 5 years, maybe get an indication where we're at on trend. We'll see how that pans out.
Sure. Okay. Couple of questions and maybe some statements. Working with our legislature, there seem to be a lot of issues with staffing and equipment on the federal level. And I think that's the reason, honestly, the sheer frustration level of having people getting stuff done on the ground. And so UDAF and the legislature decided to do that. But even after that, they grounded all the equipment and we're not letting us transfer ownership into the state. Do you know if that's happened?
We provided some funding to get them up and going, and it felt like.
There was a lot of funding in the beginning that the
Yeah.
state had put into
Yeah. So,
for the equipment. But
as far as I know, I'm trying to think the last time I talked to Cole about this, that they've got what they need. I think they're still in discussions about some of the gear that was in question. And so, and beyond that, I'd have to throw it to them to get specific.
Well, for 2 or 3 years, we were having a lot of trouble just getting pilots and getting planes
Right,
in
yeah.
there. And it was either you didn't have staff or you didn't have equipment that was up and running. And it
Those were
was kind
some
of a nightmare.
concerns that they had, and one of their goals under the new arrangement is to try to find some efficiencies there, and they're working a lot more with contractors, and they're able to tell them way in advance, this is what when we want you to fly. It's one of those things, those guys have got to have their ships running. And so if we're waiting till the last minute, they may be off doing something else. And so we've seen, we're happy with what we're seeing there.
So I think it comes down, like you said, kind of like a communication thing. They need to know ahead of time. One other thing that was lacking was the contracts with the counties, and the county having something signed that we were gonna pay for whatever. And so
Right.
we made a couple of calls and it came in and killed some dogs for us. We were causing trouble. And then after the fact, they were mad because we didn't have a contract,
Oh,
but it was fine. We were good to pay for
I'll
it.
talk, we have talked about that. The county match was, they had a lot of hurdles to lead right in the beginning.
transition
And that
was
was
not
one of the
really
things that they're
smooth.
still trying to figure out, but it was as smooth as it could have been.
Darren, I have a few questions. I'll go through one at a time. What changes can be recommended? You said we're not gonna make any right now. With
Right.
the legislative change from last year, what can be recommended?
So the statute's fairly simple. It simply, the change was that a person only needs a hunting license in order to harvest a lion. The season is a year-round season from January through December. And trapping is now legal. So those are the changes. So within those sideboards, you know, if we could bring back a recommendation, you know, at some point. I'm thinking about things like season dates for hounds, trap types, you know, regulations on the types of traps that could be used. Those would all be within the sideboards of the statute. We felt like at this time, we really only got a year of this in place. So we have some indication of how things might change, but again, you know, a couple of years, we might have a better idea of how this is, and that may raise some concerns that we feel like, you know, we need to recommend some changes.
So right now, there's no triggers, there's nothing we're waiting for, we're just
Right.
collecting data.
Yeah, we made quite a few changes last year to the rule to try to, you know, mirror what both the intent and the language that the legislature put forth. And we've had, I mean, just barely a year under those new regs. And so we talked about it. You know, I'm sure there are folks that have some concerns about it. But we felt like, you know, there's nothing major of concern at this point. And another year of data would be nice to have.
Follow-up question. The DWR created the ultimate bait station for mountain lions near Taviona, the captive sheep herd. How many lions were taken out of that project? And which numbers are they in 30 here?
31.
And how many, which numbers would they be included here on the depredation number?
They'd be part of the other. So if you look at that population graph, the lower is sport harvest, and then there's the bumped up number is everything. So they'd be included in that.
They'd be included in that.
Yeah, and that's, just for perspective, Wildlife Services and now UDAP was taking, averaging about 30 lions a year statewide on livestock stuff. And this is just one little sheep area that the take home from that is there's more than you think. Even when you think there's more.
Same thing on the Mineral Mountains. So.
Obviously, sheep, bighorn populations are very concerned about those, and we're actively managing predators when we have those populations. That was a surprise.
out on the, on Promontory.
Right.
Darren,
That first year.
this is leading a little into a comment, but I'm the chair, I can do that. I feel like the outreach section, is not doing a very good job telling hunters what they can do with lions. Is there anything from your office going out to educate the general hunting license holder what they can do with lions? I know my office takes calls weekly, and I'm confused. Can you help me understand? Can I actually just shoot one? Can I shoot any lion? Can I shoot two? Do I check them in? Like, what's being done?
We can do that. I mean, we had a news release with the initial changes. I'd be happy to sit down with outreach and we probably ought to talk to law enforcement too, and just kind of see what they've been seeing this year. I think there may be some confusion about whether they need to check them in, and they do still need to check them in. So really, the biggest change is this, the permit that you need, and then there's no bag and that you can trap. Those are big significant changes.
My questions to that statement right there, if they're basically off the radar as far as you guys manage them much, they're kind of like coyote, why do they have to still check them in?
They're still protected wildlife, and so the coyotes in Utah are not even managed by the Division of Wildlife Resources. So our objective isn't to eradicate mountain lions, but it is to manage them at a lower density than had in the past. And we, in order to understand where we are, we need to see those lines so we know how many are being taken.
So watching that and watching the perspective of the trend with the lions now that it's open, a lot of people are gonna fall out of it after a couple of years. What can we do, or have you thought of, what are we gonna put in place in a few years when people are finally, we bring them to the population that they were, say 20 years ago, when you really had to get out and hunt and you spent hours in the snow looking for tracks, and then we have an explosion of them. What's gonna get the people back in to shoot the yearling?
Yeah. Under the way that the regulations are now, we have a couple options. I always prefer to have hunters take them first. And so we could put some information out there about where we could really use harvest there. I mean, there's really good data from our deer stuff that, you know, you're seeing between 6 and 8% adult doe mortality of the lions. You're seeing a decline in your deer population. There's probably 4 or 5 units in the state right now that meet those criteria. So we could tell folks, hey, if you're gonna hunt lions, this is where we need it. Other units, it may not be quite as important. It just depends on where you are. We also have an opportunity with UDAF to do management actions if they need to, but they only have so many folks. So hunters would be the first choice. Ideally we'd be able to open some areas and close some areas, but that's just not a way that we can do it now with the new RAC. So it'll be a challenge, and we're thinking through it at the moment.
Darren, was it almost 15 years ago, we had our coyote bounty program that got created. What would it take to do a similar program for mountain lions? For cougars, and could DWR be involved, or would it have to be external?
The bounty is a legislative thing, and so, that money was appropriated. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's certainly.
Counties pitched in at one point in time.
Yeah, I know private organizations have offered payment for lions on some units. It's probably not something the division would initiate, but we have had discussions about just ways, not necessarily a bounty, but ways that we feel like we probably have the tools we need if we see a problem with deer to address it. I think in general, a focused approach is probably better. So just in terms of money best spent. And so that'd probably be my preference, but again, let's see what
That's why I asked the trend. I mean, you see the $50 bounty on the coyotes. That was a good trend until gas hit $4 a gallon and thermal optics cost $6,000. Takes a lot of $50 bounties to get you to that point. So the same suit with the mountain lions. We'll get to that point at some point because it's a free for all for them until people get to the point where like, I'm done chasing them. I'm paying dog food for the guys that are running lions. Till we drive them to the lowest point that people get completely out of it now.
We've seen a little bit, I mean, again, you know, the high wasn't last year, it was 2 years ago. And that may indicate a decline in numbers, and it may be other factors, it may be cost of gas, maybe houndsmen frustrated with the whole process. That I've heard some feedback like that too. So, and houndsmen still are the most effective way to remove lions.
Thanks, Darren. Do we have any questions from the public?
I have one more.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm looking at your lambda growth rates and I don't see anything for 21 through 23, the most recent years.
Yeah, that's the
You don't
problem
have
with
that
this
data?
model. You can't legally take a kitten, so that age group doesn't show up in a harvest. And typically people aren't taking, they may show up more now, but in the past they don't. So you really can only project up to about a couple of years into the past, and then it starts to fall apart at those cohorts. That's why we do it that way. So it's good for trend, but it's always a couple of years old.
Any questions from the public? You can just stand where you are and state your question.
Just a comment, Tammy reminded me, I got $1 million for predator control for the state, and the UDAF thing is really working out well. The other day I had a guy call me that's got some property over here east by the mountains, and he had like 10 carcasses of does that had been killed during the winter, one out in his pond. And so they called the CO, and he came and checked it out, and they were all coyote kills. One of them had a collar on, so he waded out in the pond, cut it off. But, so I called Leanne Hunting of UDAF, and I says, if you got a plane or something down here, you could, when you get one, could you do some work over here? I gave him the contact name. Anyway, they had one right at the airport. They were having lunch. They went over there and they killed 11 dogs right above that pond and right above that private property. So I think it's working out well with UDAF, better than it was with the feds involved.
For sure, they're a really good partner. They've geared up. They've got infrared, and that's a game changer. They can find those coyotes with the infrared. They're effective. So now the discussions are about where's there's livestock, and then there's where's the best bang for your buck on deer. Killing a bunch of coyotes in the West Desert is probably not as good as some of these mountains.
Depends on where you hunt.
That's true. I'm from the northern region in Western Ohio.
We like our West.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, is there any, we talk about the price of hunting the coyotes, could we increase the bounty and encourage?
We've had some discussions, and I think this came up at the board meeting recently, or at some meeting. It probably is time to look at some things like that, especially if if the focus is mule deer. You know, we've been talking about ideas to make sure we're effectively using those funds.
Darren, I don't remember, is the $50 set in the legislation, or do we have the ability to change that? I don't remember.
I want to say that $50 is in code, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure that can change it.
Well, we know somebody that can change it.
Happy to.
He's
And I
also-
might be wrong about that, Kevin, too. It might be at our discretion, it might be in the rule that's set. So we can look at all of that. We on the radar.
Yeah, I'm Blaine Abraham. Has there been any discussion on changing the ability to sell lion parts, hides, and stuff like that? Because that'll change people's effort.
We've
You can't do anything with
we've
it.
had a request to allow the sale of breed pelts. You can sell a hide if it's tan, and so it's come up, yeah. And we'll continue to have that conversation.
300 to 10, and it's worth 300 when you're done.
Right, exactly.
Darren, is that a CITES issue or is that just a state?
No, I honestly, I don't know the history behind that. And, we had a much different outlook on lions, when a lot of these regulations were put in place. I think that shifted with, with a lot of things that have happened recently, especially with the awesome deer data we've got. I came out of college with the stone cold fact that predators are never the issue. It's always weather. That was just drummed into our head as biologists, and most of us would have died on that principle, and it's just not true.
Thanks for being honest.
Yeah.
I've said it before in this setting, the biggest thing that's come out of all of our collar data is that we've learned that we don't know as much as we thought.
Right.
There's a clarification I just got. The amount of money per individual coyote is not set in code.
So that's something we have discretion on.
We have some discretion to work to target higher priority areas.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
You said that cougars are still a protected species. Is that a federally or is that state?
That's a state. It's a state. It's still there's other protected species that there really isn't much limit on harvest on.
How we made them a farm?
They used to be, but
I
in
thought they
16.
were the new legislation was, they're just a predator.
Yeah. The legislative this legislation didn't change the designation, but it did make them essentially year-round with a hunting license.
Prior to 1968, they weren't protected. The legislature protected them, I think, in 1969, if I remember, and they have been protected well, but that's still, you still have very strict regulations or very loose regulations, even as protected wildlife.
Very few, really up until 15 years ago, harvest numbers are fairly low. I'm as a biologist in the northern region, I was really careful about how many permits I was issuing because of what I'd learned in school. But, and our management plan was written that way too. And I
Big
think
difference, what you learn in school, and what you learn
that's
on the
true.
ground.
Yeah, that's true. But, and what we've seen is, lion numbers have tracked our deer numbers. Growth in deer, you expect to see that. The good news is that we made some management decisions, not just last year, but maybe the last 5 or 8 years, and have been more intensively managing mountain lions. And it looks like rather than overshooting our deer herds, we've got starting to get a handle on those two, trying to keep those two populations more balanced. But anyway, that's, yes.
I just got one more comment. You keep bringing up deer with lions,
Right.
which I understand. But those sheep, you get one lion on some of these units where you can't get housing, you can't get people. If you had a bounty program where you could offer a lot of money for someone to go in there and just kill one, that might make it worth it.
Yeah, that's an option. What we've been doing now is we call it UDAF. And we've got an agreement with
It's a lot more efficient. And for our biologists, I've got a biologist setting traps on
Right.
and killing lions on sheep.
All options are on the table, and for a sheep herd, it doesn't make sense to wait for a hunter. You need to get in and take care of the problem.
So one follow-up question. Sure. Just to go with Mr. Abraham's question on what is it gonna take to get the green pelt, get it to a green pelt? Do we need to go through the board? Do we need to go through the legislature? Because right now, like he said, it's apples to apples.
The board can make that decision.
Got my honor.
Point taken.
Okay, any other questions, public? Should we summarize our public comment on this?
Yeah.
I can collect online, so this is information.
I was just gonna say, can he make a motion to recommend that to the board?
No,
Make a
it's not
motion.
an action item, but we've got board members listening, so I think it's just as good. And this was an informational item, but we only had 3 people that commented online and mostly just in agreement and appreciation for the update. Not a lot of written comment other than, similar to what we've heard here tonight.
Thank you. Any other RAC discussion that needs to happen before we close this? Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Darren. We
Thanks for the
appreciate the
questions.
questions. Appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna move on to agenda item number 6. This is an action item. This is CWMU rule amendments, which I will see. Public wildlife coordinator. Is that the right title?
Yep. Always close enough.
There's been a couple of RACs. Do you want to provide any other updates or clarification needed for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount here, so I wouldn't even know what to dive into or do an overview. What I'll say is that this was asked for us, the wildlife board asked for us to look into this and to form a committee. We did so, met a lot of times, had a lot of lengthy discussions. I'm very thankful for the committee members, feedback we got. So, yeah, these are always hard because there's always give and take. There's a lot of compromise when it comes to the private land programs. So we felt like we got this spot that we could have a solid recommendation. So yeah, I'll take any questions if anybody wants to dive into specifics.
I'll lead off with one question, Chad. Help us understand, and as RAC members, you had a CWMU rules committee, and that has been disbanded. That's over with. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't know that we officially like dissolved or anything, but yeah, we haven't met since.
And then you have an advisory committee that is standing. That's always active standing, correct?
Yes.
And then you also have a CWMU association, which is not part of DWR.
Correct.
But they have their own meetings and their own verification.
Yes.
But lots of moving parts. Yes. So these rule amendments are a result of the committee you put together, CWMU rules committee, not the advisory committee.
Right.
Totally different committees.
Yep.
We'll open up questions from the RAC for Chad. Any others? Also another question. What does it take to update hunt planner? For example, CWMU operator has a phone number change, an email change, something. Is that a lengthy, cumbersome process for an operator? Or, because I see the public is demanding it, right? Up until the application time. And if the operator, they're busy as well, concerned with their operation, like how do we?
Yeah, it's something that we just probably need to streamline a little bit there. So there's a lot of checks and balances and it goes from them to us, then has to get approved. And then after that, then we have, it's actually on the application, there's a place that we can just put copy to hunt planner. I don't know that, I would think that link works all the time, but we have some, I think at times it doesn't, maybe at times we fail to push that button. So that's part of this rule is that it's updated by March 1st. So it just adds another layer in there that CWMU operators now, rather than having just division personnel trying to make sure everything's right, it's probably a lot simpler for the CWMU to go in and say, yeah, this is correct or not. So they'll just go in, and if anything's wrong on there, then they'll contact us and we'll update it. So we can have that updated by March 1st of every year.
Would it be possible to have permit numbers on there, public and private?
I'll have to check to see. We can look at that and see if we can put that in there. It is, the more places you put more things, the more susceptible it is to not have it correct. And there is, through the proclamation, the guidebook, it'll say how many public tags, and usually you can get at least a pretty good idea of how many private tags are.
With the CWMU and when someone's proposed to do it. And I know a lot of these CWMUs have different properties that become part of the CWMU when they're done. Is there anyone that verifies that some of those other property owners, other than the one that's presenting it, have agreed to be a part of that?
Yeah, so the biologist will do that. And we have a signature page that everybody that's in part of that CWMU has to sign that signature page.
So, because we had the one that came up on the beaver last year, And I spoke to one of those landowners that in the maps showed that he was going to be a part of that. And when I asked him if he was, he said he was not. So.
So are there times where I have had times where somebody says, hey, this is my land, I didn't sign to be in it. Sometimes it's tricky because there's multiple people that have ownership or claim ownership. Yeah, so to say that we can verify 100% that the person is the correct person signs on every single one, I don't even know if we have that expertise. There's consequences if the wrong person is.
Wouldn't it be the person who's on the certificate of ownership with the county?
Yeah, usually, but sometimes you get some trust lines or like I said, like I've had guys up in Box Elder call me and say, hey, why is my land in there? And you can't, like, it's a pretty lengthy conversation and they claim that they have the right to sign for it. You don't see that, right? So there's some tricky situations that you just have to kind of work through, I guess is what I'm saying. Our biologists do the best to verify that it is signed for and the correct person signed for it, but it's not always super cut and dry.
Yeah, right. You think of an issue and you've got a family trust, and that's the listed owner on a piece of property, and there's several people that have the ability to sign for the trust. We're not gonna contact each one of them individually. We're gonna assume if somebody's signing that they've talked to the family members and everybody's in agreement.
Can those ever be pulled out of the CWMU later if someone comes back and says we weren't doing this? So at that point, does the CWMU go away?
Potentially, if they get dropped below their acreage.
Chad, if a CWMU falls below this 90% acreage requirement, does that mean there's no shot at all to be considered?
Yeah, so this would be one where we have some that are under 90% right now, right? Those are grandfathered in. If they lose acreage, then they're no longer grandfathered in. So they got to keep that base that they've had, that they've been operating under. But yeah, going forward, if this passes, if you're not within that 90%, then there's really not an avenue to become that species of a CWMU.
Chad, I have a question about trade lands. I've never personally seen a trade land with my own eyes, but when they designate a trade land, and I know you talked about how that could potentially be marked or indicated or shared for the public, does that stay for the 3-year period? Is it just for that hunting season? How do I know how long that is a trade land?
Yeah, it is for the 3-year COR. Granted, things can change. So, but if it were to change, it'd be a change application that would come through. But it does have to be posted on the ground. That's another one that we're asking CWMUs if they have trade lands, that they got to verify that our map's correct on that. So if there's any changes, our map should be updated, and you should be able to see it on the ground as well, of where those trade lands are. And that should be on a yearly basis.
So I just want to clarify, we've done away with variances basically. If you're below 90% of what?
The one variance we probably have still is season dates for elk. Like sometimes we will extend those out.
Chad, on some of these CWMUs have land that's non-contiguous that is way more than 4 miles apart. If that CWMU changes at all, is that a chance for that CW to lose those non-contiguous? Like,
yeah, I think on that one, and kind of where we stand is some of these this is from the beginning of the CWMU program, and it's functioned for 30 years now. If that main contiguous piece falls below, then that's probably when we look at discontinuing those non-contiguous pieces. And that would be for all of them, even going forward. Like if you had 15,000 in your contiguous piece, as long as you stay over 10,000, then those non-contiguous would be able to be in.
So going forward with the red line rules on the 5 full days for the horned species, I guess you'd call it, You talked about antlerless and the emergency action that we can take with antlers, CWMU, and those types of things. Are the CWMUs fulfilling their cow permits? Are we allowing the public enough time on those units? If we do a 5-day hunt, is that, we're moving from a 3 to a 5-day hunt? Correct me if I'm wrong. On the CWMUs, the operator has to allow them 5 days for a buck or a bull.
Yeah.
The antlerless, we only allow 3 days. Are the CWMUs fulfilling those cow permits? From the way you explained it in your presentation, that we have opportunity for some more cow permits to be taken to pull the elk numbers down on CWM units. Is there any data out there that we can show or find that the CWMU operators are fulfilling those cow permits?
Yeah, I mean, we get harvest results, so we know what each CWMU every year, and now it's mandatory.
Yeah.
So we get that feedback, and we know how many each one is killing or harvesting. We probably don't have like an exact average number of days that they're allowed to hunt. I would say it's fair to say most CWMUs will allow more than the 3 minimum days for antlerless. We will be doing better going forward at having an accountability of what that harvest is and making sure they get their minimum harvest on those animals. They know that they take it really serious. One of the things the CWMU Advisory Committee was brought up earlier, when people are brought before that committee, they really don't like it. The feedback I get from operators is I never want to do that again. And part of that is, they're going to do whatever they can to help the public hunters get a harvest. With that being said, sometimes the hunters are like, I had 3 days, good enough, or I hunted 3 other species. It's not super important to me if I harvest a cow this year, or health problems, or just, they're down in the canyon and it's too far away. So there's a lot of factors that can go into why they didn't harvest before they got, but I would think most of them try to get that harvest, and they will allow the additional days.
So my next question is on these emergency elk tags. Is there a way, you talked about, potentially there's 60, you could have 60 cow permits, essentially if the operator bought a cow tag with the bull tag, kind of how you explained it in your presentation. Is there a certain amount of those that we can allot in just a lottery draw that we could put out? We know that the elk transition through these units at certain times of the year. They're creatures of habit, depending on the snowfall, that we could allow the sportsman or the public that opportunity to go in and take X amount out during that.
Yeah, a lot of these, the transition is dependent on the snowfall, and that's hard to predict. So it would be really hard to gear a hunt just saying this time and during this time frame, because and most of these that we're talking about are northern region. Yeah. And sometimes you get a good storm in the beginning of October and it pushes a bunch of elk down in, and sometimes you don't get that storm until after the hunt in February. Maybe you don't even get the storm.
Yeah.
The objective and the goal, and it will always be our priority, is to get public hunters as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So when we're going through these different strategies, that's our number one goal. That's what we're going to try to use. If we feel like that we need to use different strategies, and we can, because really what we're looking at in these places is potentially like major habitat damage. And if we're stuck in a spot where we can get a few elk harvested, and we're going to give the operators some private vouchers to give out to people to use, that we can get some harvest, or we just won't get the harvest, we want to choose to get the harvest. And this is just for the over objective units. So yeah, it's just a tool that we want to have. Using private is the lowest choice that we have, but it's probably going to be a necessary choice at times too.
Chad, my wife drives a 12-passenger van, 20 kids. It's for sale for anybody that's going on a CW later this year.
Kids
But
come with it.
after your first few RAC meetings, have you had any other thoughts or concerns about the guest policy that you guys came up with, or was that, as far as you can tell, accepted by the whole committee?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think I said it, the last one, Deseret was one that had an issue with it. They were on the committee, but they weren't there that day. So we didn't get a lot of feedback from there. It's probably the one that it affects the very most. CWMUs are very different. I've talked to operators that they don't care how many people you bring, right? Because they probably have one public hunter. And so it's a really cool hunt. That's the thing with the CWMU program. They're really cool hunts. I just went on a cow hunt on one this last year and just had a great time. And most of the operators see that, and so they want that to be a good experience for the public hunter, for friends and family. Could there be a potential for abuse? Yeah. Really what we're trying to get at is if you have a large animal, elk, moose, and you can only have one guest, that could be challenging to pack it out. And so what we're really trying to get out in there is just to make sure that a hunter has sufficient help to be able to pack his animal out. What the committee felt like was a good landing spot was just the legal amount of passengers in the vehicle. So I don't know if people will bring it to a passenger van or not, but under that they could.
It's Ontario. One more question. It was said at a previous RAC, something that was concerning for me, says, what is enforceable boundary? And maybe this is a question for law enforcement, but it was said that, well, is Onyx on your phone even an enforceable boundary? Well, then I raised the question, is a sign on a tree an enforceable boundary? Do I have to get a survey done? Do I have to find the corner stake? Like, give me a little bit more there of how does DWR see an enforceable boundary if you're not trusting what's on my phone, if it's not the county maps, like, what do we do as a public?
Yeah, and a lot of that probably would go to the court system, to the legal people that would say it. But I mean, we try to follow the code. The code is for corners to be posted, right of ways, streams, crossings. That's what needs to be posted. Probably would go to like a judge ultimately if that marking on the ground was wrong. I guess a judge would probably determine if that was close enough to the corner or if it was too far away.
So does a CWMU, like the yellow signs we've seen, their posting requirements follow the same as a trespassing requirement, corners and right of ways, streams?
Yep.
Matches.
Yep.
Okay.
The only exception would be if you have public land in it, then that public has to be every 300 yards, so that the public's supposed to be, by our rule, posted heavier than what other requirements are.
When that posted as public or posted?
So no. So if you have public land in the CWMU, that boundary's got to be posted every 300 yards. It's with CWMU signs saying, and so we're clear. We should probably try to be clear about this every time we talk about it. But if there's public land in the CWMU, it is just for the hunting of those species. Like it's not a no trespassing. You can access that public land for anything but hunting those species. So if you wanted to walk your dog out there, you can walk your dog out there. If you want to hunt upland game, hunt upland game. It's not taking over the public land. It's just the hunt boundary for that species.
For example, I'm driving to Randolph. Deseret has their yellow signs right out to the highway, but I know that's public land. But I can shoot a coyote there because it is public land.
Yeah. But
I can't go hunt deer, elk, or antelope.
Right. Yep. But if you wanted to just go on a hike or take your dog for a walk, you're illegal to do that.
Any other questions? Questions from the public?
Got a question. Hey, Jeff. So you there was a list of things that the wildlife board wanted you guys to address in the rule. You had a list of things. The minimum acreage wasn't in that list. So was it the DWR that wanted that addressed? Because you guys didn't rewrite the whole rule, so you didn't address every line. There was certain issues that were addressed. So who wanted that addressed? Who wanted the minimum acreage addressed? If it wasn't the wildlife board, then was it DWR that wanted that addressed?
Yeah, we were looking for clarity on that. And I will
Okay.
say, like, the wildlife board did have a list of things for us to look at. While the rule's open, might as well look at it all.
Yeah,
And so
but they didn't specifically ask.
they didn't, no, that wasn't one that they specifically
Okay.
asked, yeah.
So was there more concern on the department side on addressing that rule, would you say? Or why that particular rule was addressed?
Yeah, and we looked at pretty much the whole rule, like,
Okay.
maybe not line by line by line, but anything that we thought might need some clarification. So we, pretty much every year, we get at least one request of under acreage. We wanted clarity on that, of saying, okay, well, where are there other lines that we can draw? Like, are we just going to, if anybody wants to be a CWMU, can they just come into and do the whole variance thing and ask to be a CWMU? It also takes a lot of time with the CWMU advisory committee. They spend a lot of time on these things. So between those two things, we just thought it would be a good idea to come up with some parameters that we could set to make it so it fit in those.
Okay. All right. And just real quick with Bryant, I mean, most of you probably know, we are the operators of the Kimberly on the Beaver. And honestly, if there's someone that doesn't think that they should have been in there, have them reach out. I mean, if they didn't reach out to us, we don't know. I mean, we contacted most of the landowners. We thought if there's a piece somewhere that got missed and of it, have them reach out.
Did Mike contact him or did you?
I think we both kind of had a list of people we were trying to get a hold of. I know.
I wish Mike was here so I could
Okay.
ask him, because I swear I had a conversation with him. The DWR don't have to contact any of them,
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
And then
And I think we
this
reached,
particular
yeah.
one, it was Jimmy Levitt.
Yeah.
I ran into him down in town and I says, hey, I see you're going to be a part of that CWMU. He says, no, I never agreed to that.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at the map that's posted online, his property's not on it. We took the entire corner that he owns off the map. So I would check the map because his property is not in this. We knew he didn't want to be in it. We had contacted him and he said he didn't want him. And so if you look at the map, we went around his entire section of claims that's in that, southwest east corner. They're not even in the map. So I would have him check the map again because
If
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
I looked at the map, it was. and the
Yeah.
plans presented to me.
Yeah, because I was on the website just a couple days ago looking at the map just for my own purposes, and his corner is not in there. It's totally out of the entire CWMU. So we did contact him. I just want to let you
Like
know.
that one's close to home
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
had many complaints from the public about that particular area because at times we've been things posted that shouldn't
Yeah.
have been posted.
That was
by
involved with
people that
him.
were- well, it
Yeah.
wasn't saying who,
I didn't know if it was
that's up to
before
someone else to
yeah.
decide.
Because we've only owned it a few years, so I don't know it's hard for me to say where that stuff came from, but I appreciate you letting us know. But check the map again, because we specifically went around Levitt's property with our map, because we didn't want him to be.
We're good.
Okay.
For future, I'd like to see things more lined out, and I think that's kind of what they're
Yeah.
trying to address with this, because that's kind of how I felt with the vote on that last year was we get thrown into this, we're supposed to be 10,000 acres, but well, here's only 5,000. So I think the more clarification that we get, this is a good, the way I see it.
Yeah.
It makes it easier on us to not spend so much time on something that ends up passing anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll summarize, online comment. And I've got 2 comment cards. If anybody else has one, members of the public, we'll get to those shortly.
Okay, on this one, we had 14 people that expressed an opinion online. 57% were in a strongly agree category, 1 in the somewhat agree, 3 in the somewhat disagree, and 2 in the strongly disagree. So it's about an average of, was in kind of that somewhat agree when you average those out. The comments that were written There were some fairly lengthy comments if you read them. Cow harvest and the whole idea of giving, there was some objection to that. Giving private landowners the ability to harvest cows. I think Chad did a good job answering those questions tonight. It's the least, or the lowest priority that we would go to, but sometimes might be necessary. Trade lands came up a little bit in the comments. I think the bottom line is because of the splits with antlers, the public is pretty focused on making sure that they keep the opportunity to harvest antlerless elk on CWMU. That's probably the strongest sentiment that was expressed.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we'll go to public comment, and you can stand where you are because we have microphones everywhere, and address the RAC. First, we'll have Travis Murphy, and he'll be followed by Michael Labrum.
You bet. I'm Travis Murphy. I'm here to represent CWMU. I'm on the board. I sat on the committee as well. That was a very long year sitting on that committee. A very diverse group. Had a lot of in-depth. A lot of these things you talked about, we would have spent 20 hours on. We believe strongly in the CWMU, and our membership believes strongly in the recommendation of the DWR, what you guys looked at and seen today. Want to be here to say so. Austin, one quick, one of the things that CWMU is doing is we have hired a web designer and coordinator trying to work collaboratively with the division on exactly what you talked about. I think we're making some great inroads there so that people can see information quickly but accurately and similar between all 136 of us CWMU units. So I think we're going in the right direction there. So I think, Mike, one thing you on the antlerless elk, that up north, I operate as a landowner down here as well. The northern is just a lot different than here. I think the antlerless is one of the hot seats. We had 1,600 public hunters through our operations as a group, collected no complaints, which would be the antlerless. Most of the time, we sat down with our prospective biologists and stuff as an operator. In mine general, we're asked to hit an 80% harvest over 3 years. And so we have and if not, I have to go to the advisory. In this situation, I'll do approximately 100 antlerless cows a year. CWMUs are very active to make sure that our only tool is, as Kevin said, is for the public hunter to harvest those. So we work very hard to make sure that that harvest is committed. If not, we're sitting in front of an advisory board. And so the tools and the mechanisms to police us are self-driven desire to make sure the biology and the resources taken care of. I think in the latter 10 years, we're trying pretty hard as a private landowner group to make sure the public. And so with the 5 days, you said, is that long enough? When you're hunting 100 elk or bigger numbers on a few of the units, it's hard if you're breaking those guys up. You run out of calendar if you give them too much. And so I think we've done a good job of insight with trying to make sure we get our harvests, and these guys hold us to an objective, which we agreed. I shouldn't say we agreed, it's biological. So I think we get there. So anyway, in response to you, I think we're doing a pretty good job on that. Lots of give and take in this, and a lot of perspectives from people at both BYU and elk and size of these units. And so we're very happy we gave up some things and some things that we think to continue the process as a CWMU to those in the public to allow more people on our properties to share those experiences. We come to a happy medium. I think that we feel as a group good about. So anyway, that's what we'd like to suggest to you guys and say that we're glad to be here today at the spot we are today as a group. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Okay, thanks. So as Bryant mentioned, we did come before you guys last year. You guys voted unanimous in our favor for the variance. We obviously got turned down at the wildlife board meeting. But I guess here's my concern. with the variance, withdrawing that hard line at 9,000 acres. We're trying to solve a problem that's not there. I don't understand why we're trying to find a solution to something that's not even a problem. Because, you know, as Chad said, I've been involved in the variance process for a couple of years. There's been like one of us, maybe two, that have gone through this variance process. There is not a flood of people every year. There's not 15 people wanting acreage variances every year. It's not a problem. And like you know, I heard a lot of scare tactics last year in all my meetings about this big floodgate that's going to open if little ranches are allowed a variance because the biologist supports their ability to be successful. Oh, we're going to set this precedence and there's going to be this. There hasn't been a flood in 30 years, a flood of variances in 30 years of this process. There has not been a flood of small ranches trying to get into this program. There is not a problem. And so I'm somewhat concerned about the fact we're trying to find a solution to something that isn't even a problem. And so I have my opinions on where this 9,000 acres line is coming from. And a lot of it comes from CWMUs that are up north. Some of the bigger CWMUs up there have smaller ranches around them. And there might be a little bit of concern about smaller ranches, but that's not a concern in southern Utah. Just as the gentleman said, some of the concerns here aren't the same as the concerns up north. And I didn't see the whole list, but I don't know that there was a lot of operators, CWMU operators on this committee from the southern region. I think they were all from up north. And their problems aren't our problems. And so now they've assigned a solution to something that's not even a problem. And let me just, you know, I sent this data out to you guys last year, but I just want to read this to you. That 20% of the ranches right now, elk ranches in this state, CWMUs, 20% are under acreage, 20% of them. Here's their success. 6,300 acres, 100% success. 64, 100%. 69, 100%. 7,200 acres, 100%. 8,000 acres, 100%. 8,100 acres, 100%. 8,900, 83%. 9,100 acres, 90%. You do have some that are in the 60s and 70s. But their average of the small ranches is 88% success. The average of the large ranches, 83. So 20% of the ranches are under acreage with a higher success rate. Where's the problem? Like, I'm just confused at why we're trying to fix something that has not been a problem. And so that's the concern I have is you're taking a ranch like ours on the Beaver. We are under acreage. We have just over 5,700 acres. We have a biologist that studied it for 3 straight years and unequivocally put in his report that he has no doubt we'd be successful. We're inundated with elk that no doubt they can kill bulls on this ranch. Well, with this new rule, we don't even get a chance anymore. It's just like, you know what? Instead of having some sort of common sense approach where they give you as a RAC and the wildlife board, hey, here's 4 or 5 criteria. If they meet this criteria, give them a chance. Give them 2 years to prove themselves. Give them some criteria, you guys criteria to go off of. That's a common sense approach to allowing a ranch that has the means to be successful, a chance to show they can be successful. This just like, hey, 9,000 acres, anything under that, good luck. You know, you guys aren't going to be a part of anything we do. We're not going to manage elk with you. We're not, you know, you're just not even going to get a chance. I don't see that as a common sense approach to something that's not even a problem. And, you know, yes, does it take a minute for the advisory committee to read my proposal? Sure. Are they going out and spending years studying on their own? No, they're not. The advisory committee is not spending hours and hours and hours studying my proposal. It's the biologist that is supporting what we're trying to do. And so, you know, the 10,000 acre thing, you know, like they said, it's the migratory or the habitat of an elk. They roam 4 square miles, 10,000 acres. That's kind of this basis that's been thrown around. Has Utah done a study about what CWMUs can be successful? They have not. They haven't done a single study. Now, if you look in a vacuum, of course, 10,000 acres, an elk might roam that far, but we're not in a vacuum. If you have a piece of property that has a ton of the water and the feed and no hunting pressure, You think those elk are gonna roam 4 miles? Absolutely not. They are gonna sit on that private property. They're not gonna roam 4 miles because there's other variances to this 4 square mile issue that they have with roaming elk. And so what I'd like to see, and I'm asking you to give us a shot, I'm okay with the rest of the rule changes. I'm asking you to approve the rule with, and leave off the 9,000 acre. Let us go through a normal process where a biologist can support the ability for us to kill elk as a smaller ranch. Why just shut us down at 9,000? It makes no sense. And I mean, we were actually adding public permits to our proposal. We weren't taking away from permits on the Beaver Ranch. They were adding permits. So opportunity went up for hunters. There was extra hunting opportunity. Anyway, I appreciate it. And you know what? We're not even against if you're under acreage, they're proposing you give an extra tag if you fall, below the 10,000. We're even okay with that. We're fine with more opportunity, but to totally shut us out because 9,000 was a line that was drawn, it just doesn't, common sense doesn't make sense. So I'm okay. I asked you guys to approve the rule, but maybe approve it without that 9,000 acre bottom line. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, that's all the public comments we have. We'll open it up for random discussion.
I'll start the discussion. It's the same thing we talked about last year about the Kimberly CWMU. We're always looking for opportunity. We asked the board to look for the opportunity, but to pull the variance completely out of it. I don't think it's fair for the small operators. And I get where Mike's coming from, reading into it and looking at the private land that's up north that could possibly be, or maybe go after it, that's 5,000 acres or 6,000 acres. What's the harm with having some more opportunity? We're allowing these landowners to feed the public animals, let the public in there and have the opportunity, and give the cooperative units a chance to maybe recoup a little bit of that the elk and deer are eating off their lands for the public. They will move eventually if there's somewhat some pressure there, but I don't feel like that pulling that and drawing a hard line in the sand at 90% is the right thing to do, in my opinion.
Chad, can we ask a question how the 90% came up in the committee, how that was voted on, if you recall?
Yeah, so the vote was unanimous to do that. Part of this is, maybe I didn't explain this or explain it well, is in the past, we have seen elk CWMUs that are under 10,000 acres. We have some and they function well. And there's a bunch that are not elk CWMUs anymore. So that is one of the reasons, one of the considerations that we took into account is that we've had others that did try back in the day. It just didn't, most of them didn't function. So that's why we went to the 10,000 is the elk's home range. 90% of that, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know that was a biological or a scientific number, but it was a clear number. Part of what we're up against on that too is like, if we just allow a variance for anything, so now a landowner can come in with 2,000 acres and ask for a variance to be a deer CWMU. Could you have 4,000 acres asked to be an elk CWMU? Because that's like, we would get, I've been coordinator for about 5 years. I probably average one a year of people requesting for 100 acreage CWMU.
Chad, have we created, and I wish I could remember all these landowner things and CWMU things that we have in place. We created ways for guys like Mike to go out and get other tags that they can sell based off their acreage and the amount of animals without being CWMU.
So there are a lot of programs now, a lot of landowner programs. I don't think Mike has one where he could sell one, but there is unlimited entry units. If you have 640 acres, you can put in for a draw and you can draw that and be able to hunt your own property.
That's for deer, not elk.
No, for elk.
for elk?
It's a new one for elk,
Okay.
for the limited entry, so he could put in he could have put in, I don't know if he did or not, but he could have put in for this year to draw an elk tag on the beaver. In the rule, on that rule, he can't sell that, he can't sell trespass, he can't make any money off of it. But he could use the voucher himself or give it to anybody.
Isn't part of the rule to where if he could sell it and they could have the whole unit? And there's two different rules there. For how those work, and that's what I'm asking.
That's deer.
Yeah, that's deer.
Well, there's a lot of different units. If they were able to get an LOA on the beaver, then that would be a potential. From what I understand, it's not very close to having enough people agree to be an LOA. But yeah, if they joined a landowner association, they could potentially get tags.
How many acres is that?
You just have to have 50% of the private land that's in habitat. So 50% of the acreage, not 50% of the landowners, just 50% of the acres.
So I know we're in the comments, but now we've drummed up another question here. So you mentioned that that some of the CWMU operators as elk management's failed. What's the cost to the public if they failed? What's the cost to the state or the DNR if they soak their own money, their own power, their own, trying to think of the word, their time, I guess you would call it, to put up trespass signs, buying the signs, allowing the sale of the permits and spending all that time. There's no skin in the game for us. There's no cost to the public on that. There's no cost to the DNR on that. To my knowledge, that it's costing the public any type of dollars to allow a smaller cooperative unit maybe we settle it to two to one, two elk tags to one tag in this variance because he's got less than 10,000 acres. There's no cost to any of us. So if he fails on his own dime, not on our dime, right?
I guess the cost would be, maybe it's not monetary, but a limited entry tag. Like, so if you're a public guy, you drew out a limited entry elk unit and there's no elk left on the unit, then you just burned your points and you're out, which that's quite valuable to some people. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
I do want to say, I'm a property owner. I'm a firm believer in impacts to ag and private property with wildlife. And I do not understand why it's such a hard thing to compensate landowners for the impacts of wildlife on their property. And I think that there should be I voted for you last year. I think there should be some sort of a grade and scale on this property. I've had several conversations with Mike Wardle on this. He says, absolutely, that would be successful. He says, guaranteed they're gonna kill elk. My own kids have not hunted elk there, but down on that end of the mountain and found shed horns and there's all kinds of elk. There just seems to be like a super grind on having a benefit to the landowner with the impacts of wildlife. And I own a lot of property. It's not elk country, it's more antelope and deer. And we do the landowner tax. But now we don't, because now we got the draw. So we got, out of 16 tags, we got one. Or we should have been able to have 16 tags, which I'm fine with that, because I don't kill big deer. I don't kill deer every year. So, but
Okay, so you mentioned that you get one or two every year. How often do those get approved? I mean, is that kind of rubber stamp once we get there, or are they mostly rejected, or?
Yeah, mostly rejected. We had one actually in this region, Sweetwater, that was approved a few years ago. It was 8,900 acres, no ability to get any additional private land. So that was recommended by the advisory committee. had others in other locations that, like, we've had a CWMU that was applied at 4,999 acres. And it was not recommended to be a CWMU, for maybe it was 97, but it was like just right there. We try to be consistent, I think, is one of these things too, is like, you try to be consistent that it's not a pick and favorites. Yeah, you have 5,500 acres, you can do this, you have 895, you can't, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of this that we try to do, so it's cut and dry. Everybody knows where you stand in this process and what you can and can't do. It takes the subjectivity out of it.
So is there a point there where the amount of animals should be considered maybe over acreage? I feed a lot of deer sometimes. And, you put 500 deer on 100 acres of hay, and you understand what I'm saying? And then a guy down the road, he might have just 2 or 3 deer on his property, but he's got a lot more acreage. So he gets more of those landowner opportunities. Do you see what I'm saying? So it seems like we should base some of this on, depredation, what's actually happening. Maybe as much as acreage.
And in rural, it does say like habitat. It doesn't say just acreage. So
No,
it is supposed to be habitat. Once again, like if we as a division had to go grade everybody's private acres habitat, it gets to be a lot, right? Like that would be a ton of extra work. And so we try to have some sidebars to help us, like, okay, in these scenarios, then let's do this, and this one, let's do that, where we can help people out. But yeah, I mean, ideally, yes, if we could go and that would be awesome. I just don't know how feasible it would be with our manpower.
I'll say my comments, I understand you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, especially in rural. And I see CWMUs, they're not just a way of getting a tag. They are carving out a piece of property to become its own unit that's managed with huge season dates, starting September 1st with a rifle. They don't match regular season dates. They don't match hardly anything that we do on regular units. So that's an entirely different program. To Tammy's point, yes, I think we need to do more for landowners. I think they demand it, and we should do something for them, but it might not fall under the CWMU program, in my mind. I think we're going to continually look at the landowner permit program. We're going to look at all these other avenues, which I think we need to continue to do. But the CWMU program is the largest program, and it's very unique in the West, even as it sits, where you take that property entirely out and manage it on its own. It really is a new unit. And I think that's why they have to set these boundaries or these minimum requirements. When they might not make sense, but we got to draw the line somewhere. This is a huge program. So as far as someone who spends a lot of time updating websites and always behind, I feel for you on the hunt planner, but I also, if I was an operator, I would be frustrated at people trying to contact me in March. What are my season dates? When can I hunt? What can I do? Like, you're not going to draw anyway, right? That's what I want to know. That's the reality. But just like, let's get some more information on there, whether it's a portal where the operators can update or something. As someone who wants to alleviate concrete and give more limited entry options to the residents of Utah, we are missing the boat on CWMUs in my mind, because there are some phenomenal hunts that people are too scared to apply for because if they don't know the operator or one of the landowners, or they didn't grow up looking at that property, want the trespass, they're probably not going to apply for it because they're too scared to burn their points. There's too much gray area. And granted, I'm not saying every operator needs to become a public informant of how it works on their CW. Like, I just want to see more data on there. I would like to see more of the harvest reporting data. What are the age of the bucks killed? What are the sizes? Like, let me research a little more and maybe it'll help get more applicants for CWMUs because we tout this public opportunity. But when you look at the numbers of how many public actually apply, it's very minimal compared to what it should be, in my opinion. Let's tout it as a cool program for the public. Let's get more information, more pictures, better updates. And I think you're headed the right way, but I want to see that from everybody, from the solution, from the operators. Let's get it out there. Let's get some people to draw these tags and have good experiences. When I see CWMUs that have less than 5 applicants, for one permit, it makes me scratch my head. It's like, is the operator a jerk? Probably not, but people are too scared to go there or too scared of the unknown. They're gonna stick me in October and it's gonna be a horrible hunt. Let's make it more transparent and let's use it.
Hey, we're going that direction, and we've had, like, Deseret is one example, they have that. And like you said, it helps them out too, like, they're able to put a lot of information. People these days too, I think, would rather look at information on a webpage rather than call and talk to somebody a lot of times. But that, like Travis said, that's the direction that we're going, so we're trying to make it head that way and make that information just available for people that they can just see what they need to see and just have it all there at the fingertips. So it may take a little bit of time, but there's a couple, another one that I know that he just did a website and it cut his calls down. Like, it's, a lot of this is even for them, like, it cut his calls down to minimum, like, significant. So I think that's the way that we're going. It may take a little bit of time to get everybody on board with it, but that's where I see us headed on that.
Any other discussion? Entertain a motion? And then you want to take a stab at that?
I'll make the motion and with striking out this, the variance, the 90%. I approve as a presented with the variance, taking the variance and putting it back on the table for the operator. If that's clear,
I'm just looking at the red line, Mike, to be
Yeah.
clear, the 90% acreage requirement, only that section?
Yes.
The extra permit to the public draw and all that stuff?
Yes.
So the motion is
Let me get you, I'll get it.
to approve as presented, taking out the 90% acreage requirement.
To allow the
To get a
variance.
variance.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Got a motion by Mike, a second by Tam.
Okay, so here's how I've got it. To approve as presented with the exception of the 90% acreage requirement in order to be able to request a variance.
So there would be no acreage requirement
Remove
to request a variance.
Right.
Okay. Any discussion on the
Let me
motion?
read. I'm just gonna say with as presented, but remove the 90% to make it more clear.
We ready for a vote?
I do have one question, Brian. If we remove that, there is a committee, is that right, that decides prior to this needing to go to the RACs, whether it should be allowed or not?
Yeah, so CWMU Advisory Committee, in the past has looked at every variance request, so you get a request. Mike was able to go before that committee, explain why he thought it should be an CWMU. The committee hears all the facts, takes into account the rule, everything else, and then makes a recommendation. With the way the rule is now, that recommendation wouldn't go through the RAC process like Mike had to go through last year, but it would go straight to the Wildlife Board before the renewal, and then the board would be able to make a decision on that, of saying, giving it a thumbs up or thumbs down before the renewal.
So basically, if that committee said no to it, it would be no, and they wouldn't go before the Wildlife Board. And if they said yes to it, it would go before the Wildlife Board.
Yes, that's how
And it wouldn't have to come before the RAC again like
It wouldn't.
did last
Yeah, because I was just duplicating a lot of conversations. So I believe it is like the usually on most of our rules, and now I'm speaking just off of generalities, so not 100% sure on this, but most of the time you have an appeal type of process. So I would think that if the committee said no, then he could probably appeal that to the Wildlife Board, and the Wildlife Board would would still make the final recommendations.
And
How I
still avoid
think
the
that would- Yes, but it wouldn't come through here.
So two questions. How many CWMUs are in southern Utah and specifically in our region?
How many do we have, Teresa? 12 or
I was
13?
gonna say 12. That's the number that's in my head, but
12,
Yeah.
13-ish.
Are they elk or deer?
We've got pronghorn, deer, and elk.
So all three of them. Okay, the other question, we already had this discussion. It's night and day difference between southern Utah and northern Utah, not only on, the high desert, the arid, whatever, but the difference between public land, the percentage of public land and the big private property blocks. There's not a lot of private land down here. I mean, my county specifically is 77% federal land, 10% state, and 13% private land in Beaver County. And so a smaller block, especially if it's, any of it is improved, and maybe yours probably isn't, but like Sitla land or anything that's been improved, that's where the wildlife, that's where they congregate. How many members of the board or the committee are from southern Utah?
So we had, Travis was our, I think our representative for down here. He's
You're the
on
one
Avant
applying?
Enzyme.
We would love to get more operators from down here. We've struggled to get involvement. It's not a big brother, no brother thing. We would love Eastern, Southern, sorry. But yes, I represented and I agree exactly with what you guys also. Not quite the same as on your side of the hill, but.
You're not, your neighbors.
And I will say it is hard, like on a committee, you don't want it so big that you can't get anything done, right? So we try to get representation from everybody. We try to get representation from big CWMUs and from smaller CWMUs. We did the best we could on that, yeah. So it's, we like to get input from everybody. We knew that Mike was going through this, obviously, but he'd just done that, so it was, I don't think that part was a secret, so.
Everybody clear on the motion we're gonna vote on?
You want me to read it one more time? Sure. So the motion is to approve as presented, but remove the 90% acreage requirement in order to be able to request variance. Okay, is that right?
Yep. We'll do a roll call vote. Berlin?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yep.
Russell?
Yes.
Yes. And Brooklyn?
Yes.
Passes unanimous. Got that. Also welcome Wildlife Board Member Kent Johnson. Looks like he's joining us online. Listen into the Southern Region meeting. Lucky him. Okay, thank you, Chad. We had passed all this. We're good.
Kobe's up.
All right, Kobe up. This is our last agenda item. It's an action item. Conservation Permit Program Rule Amendments. Kobe Jones, the Wildlife Section Chief. Kobe, would you like to provide us any clarification updates?
One of the things that I've done on the other RACs is just more talked about the conservation permit program for a few minutes, if that's okay. What the intent is, how it came to be. So it was started in the 1980s. We had, Utah's pretty unique in that when it was settled by European settlers, the most predominant big game animal in the state by far were bighorn sheep. There were far more bighorn sheep than mule deer or elk or anything else in the state. In fact, I find it pretty interesting. The estimates upon settlement of mule deer, which is really important to us as Utahns now, were about 5,000. Now that's a pretty crude estimate, right? But there's an account of a gentleman who lived at the base of the Monroe Mountain. And he said, lived here for 20 years, saw my first mule deer today, but they saw bighorn sheep everywhere. bighorn sheep have a lot of problems, a lot of disease susceptibility and other issues. And by the time they hit the early 1900s, the last sheep on the Wasatch, I think, was seen in 1926. I'm wrong, I'm sure Justin will correct me if the text here pretty quick. But mid-1920s. By the time they hit the 1980s, it was thought that there was a very small remnant population of sheep in southeastern Utah. But apart from that, everything else had been extirpated. And sportsmen came and they really, really wanted to reintroduce sheep. They really wanted to move sheep around and have something that was so important to Utah's history than we were back on the landscape. And so there was an idea to sell one permit to harvest one ram, this remnant population, and then take those funds and reinvest back into Utah wildlife. So it started with this dream because they didn't have money to get any sheep or move any sheep around. They were able to do that. They sold one permit. They made $20,000. They had their first bighorn transplant with $20,000, and it was off. And since then, just going back to about 2001, so we had about 20 years where the program evolved. It started to solidify in the early 2000s, and about 2001, or since 2001, it's generated over $80 million for wildlife revenue, habitat restoration, transplants of bighorn, elk, pronghorn, and at times even deer, and been able to expand populations and help people across the state. It really is a great program. Like every great program, right? It's not perfect. It takes a sacrifice on the part of the hunters. The public gives up some permits. You know, it's about 300 permits they give up. It's a percentage of whatever's offered through the public draw. So if public draw permits increase, it can increase up to 8 permits per unit. If public draw permits decrease, it will decrease. And the public giving up those permits, we're able to get a lot in return, again, for the public and for public land management agencies and at times private landowners. And a lot of folks have really benefited from this program over time, including the agency. So that's kind of the program in a nutshell. It's big and a little bit complicated, but if you have any questions about the rule change, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions for Kobe from the RAC? Kobe, I understand on your order of permits 1 through 8, you changed that, and a lot of that was because of the elk plan, right? Because everyone was, obviously, when they get a hunter's choice, they're gonna go a September elk rifle permit, is that?
Yeah, so the way it was written before, it was 6 out of the 8 permits could have been hunting the early September hunt. And we backed that off just a little bit. If you have 8 permits, you'd have to have 150 permits on the unit to hit that 8. But if you had 8 permits, right now, the way the elk plan's written, 10%, I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember, 10% of those can have that early September hunt. So you have 15 public draw hunters, and you would have had up to 6 conservation permits in that hunt as well. So we backed that off a bit. It's still at 4. You know, the goal is to generate revenue, but we wanted a little bit more equitable distribution, so we moved some of those permits into the mid-season and the late season.
Now, conservation permits are set on a 3-year cycle now, so they're gonna stay the same for 3 years, right? We're on the 3rd year now.
So, yep, so this year's the last year, so we'll have the conservation permit draft this fall, where the groups will, through, again, the process is outlined in the rule. They'll draft their permits again to sell for the following 3 years, based upon the last 3 years' performance. So everybody's held to a pretty high standard of what they do and how they do compared to other groups too. Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for new conservation groups, or should I call it younger conservation groups, to even have a chance? Or are they gonna only be stuck with 30 permits out?
So it starts slow, right? I'm trying to remember the percent of market share they get. It's they get a percent of market share. It's in the rule. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but it starts slow, but I have seen groups progress. Utah Archery Association is a perfect example of this. They started out, I think they've been in the program. There was a short period of time where they're out of the program. They've been in the program about 10 years, and they've grown their market share to where they are getting good permits. And we had some really young groups this last run, so up to 2 new groups can enter every 3 years. And one of those groups did great and their market share increased. And if you market those permits and do well, as compared to everybody else, if you grow your market share, if everybody else sold their permits at 110% of what they were estimated to be, and you sold yours at 130, you get to keep that market share when it goes back to the draft again. So you have more buying power, right? It's pretend buying power, but it's real in a sense as well. And that's how you build up. And I've seen groups do it. It's a lot of work. I've also seen groups that have market share and they for whatever reason, they say, this is a lot of work for what we get out of this. We'd rather just go back to having our banquet and not do all this work. So it's a lot of work for the groups that participate in the program. There's obviously a benefit to them, but some of them have felt like the benefit wasn't worth it in the past as well.
Another question on, as you know, I'm anti setting permit numbers before we actually set permit numbers. So to your point, when we're going up to 8 permits on a unit, that's gonna happen way before we even set the permit number. So what happens if you estimate too high and you give 8 permits on a unit and it doesn't come in at 150
If
tags?
something catastrophic happens, we can pull them back. In the rule, we can pull them back, we can discontinue, we can. We usually won't do that for consistency's sake unless it's something big. But where we canceled hunts and other things and other times, it's a phone call and you can't sell that permit this year. So yeah, there is that clause in there as kind of a security blanket, and we've used it.
Bighorn sheep, obviously Utah on most of the hunts is managing for 100% success. That's a generality, but.
Sure.
Why do we give the conservation? Why do we want to give the conservation permit holders till December 31st and not just match that for the draw tag holders?
So that's kind of a history thing. You saw that I eliminated the variance in there. It's not a new thing. We've always given them till December 31st. We just came and asked for it in a variance every time. And it just doesn't make sense to go every 3 years and say, hey, can we have this variance for December 31st? And it's a tradition. Like I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew exactly why we've done that, but we've done it since the program started. And so it's at this point, I guess it's one of those things that where you start with a variance, it becomes expected. And at this point it's expected. So we said, let's stop dancing around this, just be clear and transparent and say that these permits go through the end of the year.
So a sportsman permit for bighorn sheep, he can start September 1st with a rifle.
Yes.
Correct, but can a conservation start September 1st, or does he have to start this day the season opens to everybody?
So it depends on if you're talking about the unit tag or the statewide tag. So the statewide tag would start they'd start the same day. The unit tag would have to wait until that unit opened. But then this change allows that unit tag holder to go through. But if it's a unit conservation permit, same starting date as the unit, and there's only one statewide tag for Rockies and one for deserts, and then your sportsman's, and then your governor's tag. Yeah.
Was the sportsman's draw ever considered in this rule revision to open up to non-residents?
That wasn't something we considered in the rule revision.
Should it have been?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you put me on the spot here.
I say no. Leave it to Utah.
That is something that we have left to Utah, and we definitely have to talk to Lindy about that, Austin. I don't want to jump into that. And I think there's a lot to that. That is something that we've offered to the residents of our state. It's a pretty special tag. Yeah, I don't know that that's something that, as an agency, we're super interested in opening up to non-residents. And I will fight for non-resident opportunity because all of us are non-residents somewhere. Right? I mean, I like to hunt as much as I can, as often as I can. I hunt Wyoming, Idaho, Mexico, wherever I can, Montana, but some of the special opportunities you save for your residents.
And to be clear, there are no repercussions if a non-resident has a conservation permit to our quotas, correct? We don't care who the tag is sold to, conservation tag.
That's fair.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
If we open this up, on the sheet, does that bring forth the deer, the elk conservation permits next year to be opened up to go to the end of the year?
No, this is something that, this isn't a change, it's just transparency. It's a variance we used to ask for
Every 3 years.
yeah, Kevin asked for it when he was chief, Justin asked for it, Bill asked for it. It's just, we used to come and ask for a variance to do this. Now we just put it in rules so we don't come and ask for a variance. Before you could ask for a variance, it was more open the other way before, because before you could ask for a variance for any species. You could say, we want a variance for deer, a variance for, and we said, no, we eliminated that possibility of a variance. This is locking it down and saying, no, there is no variance, only sheep is.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we will summarize public comment online.
We only had 5. 3 of them were in the agree category and 2 in the either somewhat or strongly disagree. You know, there's strong opinions about the conservation permit program and marketing wildlife and whatnot. Generally, it's supported, the benefits recognized, but there are some people that don't like it. And it's always been that way.
So with you saying that, can I ask a question?
If I can refuse to answer it, go ahead.
Ask it.
Okay, ask it. Yes, you can ask it.
So there is some strong consternation about this and more recently than before. What is the percentage that the groups receive themselves that doesn't have to be put back on?
Okay, yeah, so.
Like what's that breakdown of the money?
Yeah, the breakdown. So the breakdown of the funds is 30% comes directly back to the agency, right? That comes back every September in a check. And that's the money that we use for a lot of our surveys and a lot of our research, right? So elk flights are super expensive. Helicopter in the air is anywhere from $1,400 to $1,800 an hour. So survey flights for elk, moose, sheep, all those things, we match that. We use those matching funds and use a lot of that for that. The other, there's 60% that comes back in a cooperative agreement. And that's a lot of the money that you see used for habitat money. So when you saw, what was it? It was over $4 million they put on habitat projects this year, the groups. A lot of that is that 60%. So that leaves the group with 10% that they have at their discretion to use on the things that whatever may be. We don't have to approve the use of that 10%.
Don't they also have a opinion or whatever the cooperative agreement, whatever that project is as well?
A what? I'm sorry.
Look, the 60% that you said that's part of that cooperative agreement, so that's going to like WRI or whatever. None of it goes to GIP stuff, doesn't it go strictly to WRI?
Well, it goes through WRI, but WRI and GIP at times partner too.
Right.
And so it's probably been used on GIP projects. I would have to look at that, but
The only requirement there, Tammy, is that we agree and they agree. So if
that's what I'm saying, is they have a choice in what those projects
right,
are.
it has to be mutually agreed upon by the group and by the division, but that could certainly be a GIP project that's going to benefit wildlife. There's no restriction why it couldn't be.
yeah, and WRI is really just it's the mechanism, it's the place that all funds are tracked, right? And it's such a great database. You can go in and see where every ounce of this money's been spent over the years. And that's what it's the clearinghouse, right? And it's what makes sure that we have those cooperative agreements in place. We say, hey, we're gonna use it for this. Okay, we agree. And it's how we,
But you're right, they do have some say on that 60%. They have some input on where it gets spent.
yeah, they absolutely, yeah, the groups have, and they, yep.
With
regards to the funds, the 10% goes to the organization.
Administrative overhead. Sure.
Okay. Can they use that on out-of-state projects, or does everything have to stay in state?
The 90% has to stay completely in state. The 10% is they can use that for administrative overhead, and we don't oversee the expenditure of the 10%. I should say though, most of these groups give back more than the 90%. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of times wildlife is receiving quite a bit more than the 90%.
But the 90% has to go to in-state projects completely.
So, I mean, I guess this is where I'm looking at this saying, yes, or projects that directly benefit in-state wildlife. For example, if we're gonna go catch bighorn sheep in Nevada to bring them back to the nursery facility, that would be an appropriate use, right? I mean, you would technically pay for a capture in Nevada, but there's no way to have that capture to get those sheep back to you. So yes, it's all to benefit Utah or spent within the boundaries of Utah.
With the money that's involved now in these tags and that's coming in, it's a big amount.
Oh, yeah.
So when you get the big amounts, that 10% really becomes a huge amount. And you may have a organization that likes to spend their money on elk in Montana or in Colorado versus Utah. Is it in the states maybe benefit to relook at that 10% that may be dropping that amount to where they can't do that?
What I would say, if I'm just being completely honest, is it sounds like a lot of money until you see the effort that they put into getting those high. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen that they show up and they get high dollar bids for those permits. There's a lot of work and effort put into that. And it's a small sacrifice. You know, I remember last year I was doing a podcast with a gentleman from another state who he was so excited that he said, we sell our conservation permits and we keep 100%. And I said, well, that's because we give up 10. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you sell your conservation permits for a lot of money. Yeah. Well, where do you do it? Well, we do it here at the expo in Salt Lake, where I said, well, that costs a lot of money to put on. And because Utah and other states sacrifice a small portion of their permit money, we're able to put on functions like that, where then you can say you kept 100%. But if we weren't putting functions like that on in our state, you wouldn't be getting the kind of money that you're getting in your state. So I guess what I'd say is, sure, it's a sacrifice, but RMEF, SFW, MDF, these folks are good partners. And there's a lot of times when we get back way more than the 90%.
One more question. The conservation tags themselves, you said there's a percentage, right? That you allow for, that you carve out of the public, the draw system, whatever, for conservation, right?
Yeah.
Understand that, right?
Yes, it's all detailed in rule. This many permits equals this conservation, this many equals this, yes.
So then does the DWR, does the division donate them to these organizations or do they purchase?
So Tammy, this is where we're gonna go through and read the rule together because it's a bit complicated, but they have.
They bid on them, essentially.
They bid on them. There's a value assessed to that permit, right? You know, for the 3-year history of that permit sells for $20,000 every year. Okay, and so based on their performance, they have it's not real money, but they have an amount to say, we want that permit. And then if they go out and then over the next 3 years, they sell that permit for 75% for $15,000. And another group went and sold that permit for $25,000. Their buying share, their share, their buying power at the next time we had the draft would go down.
but they're not handing any over. There isn't any cash exchange.
There's
for that
no,
voucher.
there's no real money exchange.
I didn't think there was. I just wanted to clarify it.
It's a really detailed rule because of all the potential pitfalls, right? But it's a really detailed rule of this is how it'll be done. And then all the money has to be spent within 2 years when it was generated. And that was something that our board put in place when Carl Hurst was there, just to make sure. And then there's a detailed accounting every year. There's an audit every year. There's a report printed every year. All that is on the website. And we hand that out to folks to read whenever they have questions. And we'll take any questions as well.
Question. I know there's an online comment about the verification process making it harder for people in the South to get access to the permits. Do you think that is true?
Oh, he's talking, there was a comment about requiring in-person attendance at the expo, and so that's a different rule. That's not the conservation permits. It's a valid question, but those aren't conservation permits. Those are come out of a different. The comment was towards, are we really maximizing the value of those permits by requiring people in-person applications? But that's for the expo permits. It's a different pool of permits, but it's a valid question.
Okay.
I had a quick question too for you. So I actually get a teeny bit of WRI money for research. Should I recuse myself from this action?
No, this is, WRI is way bigger than just conservation. It's a small percentage of the overall WRI. I think you're fine right now. Thank you for asking.
Way to be honest.
Okay, we don't have any public comment cards for this agenda. Oh, we do have one.
Sneaky little
Coming in almost late.
Exactly on time.
Okay, I guess we'll go to public comment at this time.
Stay standing.
Braden Richmond, go ahead, Braden.
So Braden Richmond representing myself, and just thought it was appropriate to comment on this. As most of you on the RAC know, I've participated heavily in the conservation group for years. Very involved, donate, I guess, thousands of hours at this point. I'd just echo what Kobe said. I think clearly there are those in favor and those opposed. We are dealing with a public resource, and I think we always need to be very mindful of that. It's a trust of the state, and we take that serious. However, the benefits are just unbelievable. Utah puts more money on the ground in conservation than all the other Western states combined. Let that settle in for a second. It's huge amounts of money. Utah, the DWR doesn't tout their horn really good at this, but the studies they're doing, they're leading the way in the Western US. There's other states doing great things, but Utah's doing greater things. And it comes from this money. If you drive around, all of you that drove on the freeway tonight saw the benefits of that money. It's everywhere. You can see it from the freeways. You can see the habitat improvement. This year we're having a sheep hunt on the Mineral Mountains. Kobe started the presentation off talking about sheep and the heritage in Utah. We're going to have a sheep hunt on Mineral Mountains in Utah. So just some incredibly good things come out of this. Yes, there is some controversy. Let me address that 10% real quick. Several of your major players in the conservation tags have, several years ago now, I want to say 5 years ago, they would spend 100% of their 10% for overhead back on conservation. And they've done that, and they provided an accounting of that. So it's a lot of good things. I guess one other thing I'd comment to Kobe's point, it takes a lot of work to raise this money. So some of the bigger groups have committed to put that 10% back on the ground, but they pay a lot of money to give that 10% away. So I just ask for your support in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Braden. We'll open up to more RAC discussion. I'll give you my opinion. I mean, yes, it is I see the conservation permit program, it's a cost of doing business. I don't have to get into all the reasons why we should be for or against it, but I think why we don't allow the sportsman's raffle to be open to non-residents is because we have so many other revenue generating sources. States that allow everybody to participate, we don't make any money relatively off the sportsman's raffle because it's residents only, it's the same drop period. And so maybe we don't need to open it to non-residents. And same could be said for the expo. Maybe we don't need everybody that has a computer or phone to buy expo permit entries because we have so many other funding sources. States that open it to everybody are very limited. And you see them going away from auctions, like Arizona just did away with all their conservation permits. They want no more auctions. So whether you believe in that or not, it's dangerous territory when you start getting a severely limited funding source, which the DWR relies on and which our animals have come to rely on. So I do believe in that. If the only portion that I personally have a hiccup on, I just want to see equal opportunity. Yeah, if you were able to buy a bighorn sheep auction permit, that's great. And if you want to hunt until December 31st, I think the guy that drew the permit, the area tag should be able to hunt until December 31st as well. So I would put an asterisk there and say, you can end them on December 31st if you allow the area draw tag guy to hunt until December 31st as well. If you don't like that, then no, you don't get to. But I just want to see some equal fair share. Yes, statewide can start earlier. They can use a rifle. That's great. They paid a lot more money, but when you start getting into area permits, I think back to, your pay to slay or you're buying privilege. Well, let's have the same privilege as who you bought the tag and avoided the draw. I just want to see it.
It's always good to resurrect Gene a little bit.
That's just
Gene's watching, I'm sure.
Gene's watching.
So those are my
I shouldn't
comments.
say resurrect, because that implies that he's died, but he has.
Just from the rack.
What is that word? You just mirrored him or something like that.
So, any other discussion?
Essentially, what you're saying, Austin, is, I'm just trying to get some clarification. Somebody purchased the permit for X amount of dollars versus the guy that drew the permit that took 28 years. He gets the same opportunity as the person that spent $50,000 for the permit every year, or he has one time 28 years. It essentially becomes a lifetime license for that individual that spent max points, because we have those people that are still available, 28 points on the beaver elk, for instance. Give him the opportunity to hunt that.
And again, it's only sheep.
It's only sheep. Well, okay, so sheep, same thing. I mean, with the sheep, it's once in a lifetime.
By definition.
By definition.
It's a minor thing, honestly. It doesn't, most people are gonna kill their sheep anyway. It's more of a principle for me. If you're saying they have to wait till the opening day of September 15th or whatever in that unit, then they should end on the same day too.
The thought process is, for me though, as an archer, that gives me, I would much rather kill a desert bighorn with my bow, and it gives me more opportunity as a public sheep holder. If I drew a sheep tag, gives me that much more opportunity. I'm not packing a rifle. I had the opportunity to make a few chances than just this one little short water sign. So, I mean, I guess it's something to look at, but
Just how I feel. I'm not a proponent for 100% harvest on any hunt, but we're already managing for that on sheep.
Yeah.
So, and that's why they ask for the variance anyway. They expect everybody to kill on these rifle sheep hunts. Any other discussion? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion that we pass it with the public hunters getting to hunt the deer on the sheep tags along with the other hunter. License tag.
They should have done one.
For all sheep hunts,
just conservation permit holders.
It's state area conservation permit holders, so it's not statewide.
Can I say units, because that's still worse than
It says area in there. I'm going off of Kobe's red line. Area conservation permit. Now, we're not setting season dates for bighorn sheep hunts here for draw tags. That's why I would say it as an if. You could say only approve this December 31st if you also do it public. We get around this not being on the agenda. It's always.
The angle.
Okay, let me make sure I've got this right. If I can type here.
We don't have a second yet. We got a motion by Brian.
I'm waiting for it to get all typed down here.
Okay, to approve as presented, but make December 31st the end date for all unit or area sheep hunts. Not just the conservation permit holders, if it's a, let's see, I gotta do that. I still don't have it. For all unit hunts, if it's approved. Yeah, I can make it a lot shorter. Conservation permit.
I'll second that.
We got a motion by Brian, second by Mike. Any discussion needed on the motion? This will approve the rest as presented. We'll do roll call vote. Berlin?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
Russell? Yes. Rachel?
Yes.
And Brooklyn?
Yes.
Thank you, Brooklyn. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you, Kobe.
Thanks.
That ends agenda item number 7. Final announcements, the wildlife board meeting for these agenda items will be June 13th. That's adjusted from the original date of June 11th, so that'll be Thursday, June 13th. In Farmington Bay, so you can submit comments to the wildlife board. That's still open to submit those comments directly. And they will make the final decisions on all these agenda items at that point. And then our next RAC meeting here will be later in the summer, August 6th, and that'll be back in Cedar City. So appreciate everybody coming today. And we'll motion to adjourn.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Mike makes a motion to adjourn. Chuck seconds. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll end the stream. See you later.